Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're doing fine. I'm also okay. Now that people are already talking of 2027, I was thinking we also discuss that too. Currently, we have people who are saying Ruto is a one-term president. There are those who are saying Kalonzo is the destined sixth president of the country. We also have individuals who are saying Raila should not even try to win the AUC thing because the presidential seat in the country is vacant. In other words, they are saying if Raila was to come back, his chances of winning are very high. And so I ask myself, is it possible for Ruto to still win even if both Kalonzo and Raila Odinga were to be on the ballot? If that is something you are interested in, stay tuned, and of course take a moment, subscribe to the channel if you have not, so that you don't miss similar videos. The reason as to why I'm asking this, I'm trying to answer this question is, there are those who have already written Ruto off. The team that is saying Ruto is a one-term president, that it is guaranteed he will go home. In fact, his supporters are being told, just enjoy the remaining 3 years or less, knowing very well that come 2027, August, we will have a new occupant at the house on the hill. So is it possible for Ruto to still win? In my opinion, my political biases aside, I want to paint 3 scenarios for you. One scenario is where Mount Kenya, however bitter they are now, because currently they are very bitter. Actually, they are the people leading the chorus of Ruto is a one-term president. Majority of Mount Kenya people are bitter. And if anyone lies to the president that Mount Kenya is still intact with the appointment of Professor Kindiki, that would be doing disservice to somebody you support. The reality on the ground is people of Mount Kenya are somehow feeling that Ruto has not lived up to their expectation. The funny part is what their expectation was. In my mind, I'm persuaded that majority of Mount Kenya people didn't vote for Ruto because they liked him or because they believed in his ability to deliver. It was for them a case of, we don't like Raila, and Raila is the person, is the alternative. We don't like Raila. Raila is the alternative. But then you can also ask, you may also be wondering, why not pick, why couldn't they vote for Mwaure or Wajakoya or the other people? But you see, voters of Mount Kenya are very smart. They know that if they were to cast their vote elsewhere, it would have not mattered. It would be like a protest vote, but one that is not going to give them anything at the end of it. So you have a case where they chose to support Ruto as a way of ensuring Raila does not ascend to power, but with the belief that once Ruto is in power, they were going to literally control him. I think that is why I'm saying he did not meet their expectation, because once Ruto took over, attempts to control him and micromanage him began immediately. But Ruto, you know him. He's a very strong leader. So he's not the kind that you are going to control. He's not the kind that you are going to give dictates and dictums on how to run the country. And so slowly by slowly, Mount Kenya started rebelling through the leadership of one Rigathi Gachagua, who made them believe that Ruto was the worst choice they have ever made, and that Uhuru Kenyatta was right. So they ended up disengaging their support for Ruto. And so the current criticism that is directed towards Ruto is actually coming from people who voted for Ruto overwhelmingly, especially from the mountain. But the question is it possible that this same Mount Kenya voters in a year or two change their mind and back Ruto again? I can say yes or no. And let us begin with yes. Yes, in that as long as there is no strong leader from Mount Kenya, because currently Mount Kenya doesn't even have a candidate of their own. Rigathi Gachagua has been impeached, so he can't vie. Uhuru Kenyatta is a retired president. He cannot be on the ballot. Ndindi Nyoro cannot surmount enough support to be a presidential candidate that competes with the likes of Ruto. He needed time, but things have not worked for Ndindi as expected, because Ndindi was the one who was supposed to take over from Rigathi Gachagua in 2032. But now if you want him to be a candidate by 2027, that will really need a lot of propping. You'll really need to move across the country. But even now, if he moves across the country, he won't have that goodwill that he enjoyed before, because people will just see him as a candidate who is being propped by Mount Kenya as a way of punishing or rebelling with William Ruto. And so outside Mount Kenya, he might not really be popular. So you have a Mount Kenya that might not have a strong candidate. And if they don't have a strong candidate, just like it happened in 2022 when they had none of their own on the ballot, and faced with a choice between maybe Raila Odinga and Ruto, let's say Raila decides to come and vie, then you have Mount Kenya maybe turning back and saying, okay, Ruto is a lesser evil, so they will vote for him. But no, in the case where the relationship between Gachagua and Kalonzo materializes and it becomes open that Mount Kenya is endorsing Kalonzo, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, chances of Mount Kenya voters coming back and joining William Ruto is not there. Actually, they would do virtually everything to make sure that Ruto understands their protest. So it is a yes or no. But why was I bringing this angle? In my opinion, Ruto's victory in 2027 depends on only three things. Number one, if he can sustain Mount Kenya, he's good to go. If he can retain Mount Kenya, however far-fetched that is good to go. Because, like I told you, three communities in this country decide who becomes president. And that is the Kikuyus, the Kalenjin, and the Luos. And if Kikuyus and Kalenjins are still together by 2027, then Ruto is your president. He will win no matter what. And number two is if Ruto gets the support of Luos. Again, it goes back to what I was telling you, that the trio, the three communities, when two of them come together, they produce a president. So if Luos and Kalenjin join, then it will be a replay of the 2007, where a combination of William Ruto, Mudavadi, and Raila Odinga won the election. Of course, Kibaki stole that election. Everybody knows that. And if you want to know somebody stole an election, you just go to see parliamentary majority. In Kenya, there is nothing like you can get parliamentary majority without getting the presidential vote. That is not our voting pattern. Kibaki knew that. That is why he was actually sworn at night. But that's water under the bridge. What I was saying is that if Luos back William Ruto, he's good to go. But what about a case where he neither has the support of the Luos nor that of the Kikuyus? What happens? Does Ruto still have a chance? In my opinion, yes, he can still have a chance. And this is how. Let's say you have a race where Raila Odinga is vying with the support of the Luos and parts of the Luyas and Coast. Kalonzo Musyoka is vying with the support of Kambas and Central, maybe part of Mulima. And William Ruto is on the ballot with the support of majority from Rift Valley, Northeastern, part of Nairobi, and part of Mulima also, and part of Coast. It can still emerge number one, and I'll explain how. It can still emerge number one though without getting the 50+1. Or he can emerge number 2 after either Kalonzo or Raila. Now, let's go with a scenario where he emerges number 1, but he doesn't have, he emerges number 1, but he doesn't have the 50+1. We do what we call a runoff. In this runoff, let's say Kalonzo was number 2. It will be a race between Kalonzo Musyoka and William Ruto. Chances of Raila Odinga backing the Mount Kenya as opposed to William Ruto is slim. Why? Just recently, when there were these so-called Gen Z's demos, it was offered to Raila that join us, we remove Ruto from office, and then we will see what to do for you. And Raila had an opportunity to actually join Mount Kenya in removing Ruto so that Rigathi Gachagua could take over. But he didn't. He made it clear that he understands that the community has been against him, and it was just a ploy. And also there was no path. For him, Rigathi Gachagua was worse than Ruto. So a combination of Rigathi Gachagua and Kalonzo Musyoka coming number 2, maybe after Ruto, and going for a runoff, Raila will automatically support. Raila is likely to support William Ruto in that runoff. And that will make Ruto president. Let's say he's also, Ruto does not manage to be number 1, but he manages to be number 2. And so, in a scenario where Kalonzo was number 1, and Ruto is number 2, and so Ruto and Kalonzo face it off in a runoff, of course Raila will still endorse Ruto so that he punishes the Mount Kenya voting bloc, and Ruto will still be number 1. Will still win that particular election. But what about a case where Raila Odinga is number 1, William Ruto emerges number 2, and Kalonzo Musyoka and Rigathi Gachagua is number 3? In that case, Mount Kenya will be like, we tried to convince Kalonzo Musyoka to support us. We tried to convince Raila Odinga to support us in dismantling Ruto, and he refused. So it is now our time to pay back. And so they will support Ruto to punish Raila Odinga. You see those scenarios. That's why I was telling you, chances of Ruto winning are high. And just as a recap, in case you've forgotten, 1 is a case where he gets the support of Mount Kenya, he wins. Secondly, if he gets the support of Luo Nyanza and parts of Western, he wins, whether Mount Kenya supports him or not. Third, if they are on the race, the 3 of them, Raila Odinga, William Ruto, and Kalonzo Musyoka, Ruto will automatically find himself as number 2 or number 1. And in that case, when people go for a runoff, Raila will be motivated, if he was number 3, to support Ruto to punish the Mount Kenya people who would have betrayed him by not voting for him. Kalonzo Musyoka and his team, the Mount Kenya people, if they were number 3, they would be motivated to punish Raila Odinga, who refused to join them in punishing Ruto. And so they would vote for Ruto as a protest. Either way, Ruto wins. The only scenario where Ruto does not win, ladies and gentlemen, and that is why every effort is being made currently to discourage Raila from going for the AUC, is a case where Kalonzo Musyoka and Raila Odinga go for the presidency with the support of Mount Kenya. That will require a miracle for William Ruto to win. That I tell you. I love Ruto. I support Ruto. I have supported Ruto ever since. And I can tell you that if the Mount Kenya people succeed to convince, let's say in the worst case scenario, Raila does not win AUC seat, which in my estimation is something he should win actually. So many factors are for him. So I believe he is likely to win this particular election, in the very unlikely event that he does not win, and he comes back to the country, my belief is that he will still prefer to stick with William Ruto as opposed to joining Mount Kenya in the opposition. And if he sticks with William Ruto, like I said, in that scenario where Luos support Ruto, Ruto still wins. But if Mount Kenya people succeed to convince Raila Odinga to abandon Ruto, and not just vie, abandon Ruto and come with a combined force of Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Rigathi Gachagua bringing Mount Kenya, then it will require a miracle for Ruto to win. Here is why. If Raila Odinga and Kalonzo Musyoka and Rigathi Gachagua come together, that means you have Mount Kenya, you have Ukambani, you have Luo Nyanza, you have part of Western, and you have Coast, and you have a half of Nairobi. Actually, you don't have half of Nairobi. You have the whole of Nairobi. Let me repeat. If Raila Odinga, Kalonzo Musyoka, and Gachagua, though he would not be vying, but his support, he will be bringing Mount Kenya. Let's say by that time, Mount Kenya is still behind him. He brings Mount Kenya on the block. Raila is the president. Kalonzo is the running mate. And Gachagua is bringing this from maybe some political deals, beginning with these people. Then they have part of Mulima, a huge chunk of Mulima. They have former Central Province. They will have Ukambani. They will have Nairobi, because Raila would have a half of Nairobi. The other half is mostly from Mount Kenya. And they will have Nyanza and part of Western. That puts them ahead of Ruto, who will be depending on Rift Valley, Northeastern, and a few votes, and part of Western, and a few votes from Coast and here and there. That will not match the combined force of Raila, Rigathi, and Kalonzo. So, ladies and gentlemen, how is Ruto going to ensure? Because Ruto doesn't lose political races. You can check his history. Ruto vied against a very prominent KANU guy when he was just somebody who had nothing in Eldoret North, and he won by a landslide. Moi didn't like him, but he won. Ruto doesn't lose. When he joined Raila in 2007, I've told you here, Raila won the presidency. And by the way, this is not something, if we are a realistic people, we should accept our mistake that this is one election that was rigged, and we don't have to pretend that it never happened. It happened, and lives were lost in the process. But Ruto joined Raila then, and Raila won. And when Ruto joined Uhuru Kenyatta, who was tasteless, politically speaking, went for 2 terms with Ruto's support. And when Ruto was dared that you are claiming that you made Raila prime minister, you are claiming that you made Uhuru Kenyatta president, now make yourself president. He is the president. So winning political battles is not a problem for William Ruto. He doesn't have a history of losing. He doesn't lose. So what do you think is his strategy? I think the strategy of William Ruto, if you ask me, is twofold. One, he is looking at if Kindiki can bring the mountain back. And this may sound far-fetched because as of now, emotions are high. So people are like, Kindiki negute, they don't want to see Kindiki. A lot of things, you know how people react emotionally. And but if Kindiki can bring the Upper Eastern on board, chances of Kikuyus in diaspora voting against Ruto are also very minimal. That gives him a serious chunk, because that is over 2-point-something million votes from Mount Kenya. If he gets the 1.3 and another 1.6 from Laikipia and Nakuru, chances are from there that William has a very good start against his competitors. But another thing, he's looking at retaining Raila. Of course, Raila will make demands, having known that he's holding the key. But Ruto knows how to handle Raila Odinga. He knows when to concede and when to say no. And also, they have a good working relationship with Raila Odinga. That is why when Raila was given an option between Rigathi and Ruto, he just went for Ruto. They have a good working relationship, and he knows that Ruto is a man of his word. Part of me believes that Raila is like redeeming himself. He feels like Ruto was so good to him, and he repaid Ruto by being so nasty with him. But it's an opportunity for them to come back together. And you've seen from what Raila has done all along that he has stood, since Raila started standing with Ruto, that he has been very steadfast standing with Ruto. And Ruto has repaid this by also popularizing Raila across the world in as far as his candidature is concerned. So Ruto is looking at two ways. If Kindiki can hold the Mount Kenya East, we call it the Upper Eastern. So if Kindiki can hold the Upper Eastern for him, and Raila Odinga brings the Luos and part of Western, especially Busia and Vihiga and part of Kakamega, I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Ruto will win by a landslide. And so these are things that William Ruto, I think, has already considered, because one of the worst mistakes you can make in politics is to underestimate William Ruto. Anytime you see William Ruto defeated, when you see him down and you're like, now it is the time, he springs up and you're shocked. There were times these Gen Zs were on the street and they were like, now it's just a matter of Ruto resigning, we are removing. And then Ruto was like conceding every ground. Within a short time, the Gen Z issue was over. And Ruto returned very strong. Ruto returned back and stronger than he was before. So I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that so far, William Ruto has considered all possible scenarios, and I think he has made his calculation to ensure that he returns back a second term. And you see, for him, returning a second term has nothing to do with the power that be. No, this is a man that wants a legacy. He wants to go down as the guy who fixed Kenya. Because if he doesn't, remember, Kenyans will be like, we tried a nobody, and that nobody failed us. We are better off with just going with people from known families. And so Ruto has a burden on him to prove a point here. And so far he's doing things. They may be unpopular now, but they are things that are going to change life in the future. And so he needs the 10 years, God willing, if God gives him life. And I think he has made a plan for it. Ladies and gentlemen, you can also share with me what you think about this. Do you think Ruto has a chance of winning the re-election of 2027? And if you don't, also let me know. Otherwise, let's engage in the comment section about this matter and drop a like. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, I urge you to consider subscribing so that you don't miss subsequent videos. Otherwise, let's meet in the next video.